Hello, and welcome to More Together with School District 25, where each week we'll take a deeper dive into some of the issues, accomplishments, news, and current events happening around our school communities. This is a chance for listeners to get to know the school district and learn more about the educational issues you care about the most. I'm Courtney Fisher, and joining me today to kick off our first podcast episode is Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Douglas Howell. Today, we'll be discussing the upcoming election for the school district's Supplemental Levy Renewal on Tuesday, March 9th. First, I want to welcome my guest, Dr. Howell. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Courtney. It's a pleasure to be here. Pretty exciting, too.
Well, this is an exciting day. As you know, this is our first ever podcast. And this is something bold and new for our school district. And I want to thank you for giving me that green light to explore this idea and bring it to our community members.
I really appreciate you, Courtney, always finding a new way to touch our community in public relations and communications. So this is just one more tool we can put in our box and inform all of our community about the great things that we do in Pocatello-Chubbuck School District.
Absolutely. I'm really excited because I think this gives us a great opportunity to really give our community members a deeper understanding of some of the issues and some of the decisions and thought process behind some of those decisions that are being made. So with that, here's what we'll be covering today. So listeners, in today's podcast, you're going to learn about School District 25 and the community of learners we serve. What is the supplemental levy? How funds are used from this levy? Examples of items funded by the supplemental levy. How will the levy impact you as a taxpayer in our community? And finally, where and when to vote. So let's get started and dive right into our topic. So I think as voters prepare to head to the polls, it's important to get educated about the topic. Dr. Howell, will you please take a moment to share with our listeners a little bit about the school district, who we are and who we serve?
Sure. You know, interestingly enough, in doing a little bit of research on this topic recently, Washington Elementary celebrated I believe it was 100 years. And so they came together and looked at the history of Washington and Pocatello-Chubbuck School District.
Right.
And we found that Pocatello-Chubbuck School District was actually independent number 1 district. Now, I don't know the process of how it ended up to be 25, but nonetheless, that's a pretty historic moment, really, for everyone.
It really is. We learned some interesting facts through that story, and wouldn't it have been nice to have remained school district number 1? We could have had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So it was actually founded in 1887. The Pocatello-Chubbuck School District is the 5th largest in Idaho, and of course, the Treasure Valley area, Boise, and West Ada probably take number 2, number 1, and then some other districts just slightly ahead of us by maybe 1,000 or so students. We have about 12,000 learners, and that encompasses an early learning program all the way through, of course, our high schools. And we have about 1,700 staff members. That includes many substitute teachers because they are certainly considered part of our staff. We have 13 elementary schools, 4 middle schools, 3 traditional high schools, 1 alternative school, and also, as I mentioned earlier, the Lincoln Early Learning Center, which also includes our Head Start program.
Right. I think the breadth and depth of those numbers always surprise people that maybe aren't as familiar with our district. So let's turn our attention to the supplemental levy. Can you explain what is the supplemental levy and what purpose does it serve?
Yes, thanks. The supplemental levy is a 2-year renewable levy. It's voter approved, and it generates funds for the school district to support our local operating costs and the delivery of K-12 instruction in our community. And it really makes up the difference between the state funding, some of the federal funding that we receive by local dollars. And we really appreciate everything that's been done in the past to support the levy and moving forward.
Right. So this is a 2-year renewable levy. What amount of funding is the district proposing on the March ballot?
This year, actually, it will be for 2 years because that's how we run the levies. And so it would be $9.25 million for each of those years.
Okay. So let's say the value of property increases in Bannock County, and therefore the amount of property taxes collected also increases. In that event, does it mean that the school district receives more than $9.25 million?
No, not at all. In fact, the levy, the amount is fixed, and so as we we receive that money each year, regardless of whether property taxes increase or decrease. Overall, in Bannock County, it remains the same.
Right. So some other taxing entities, that amount is kind of fluid and fluctuates with those property taxes collected, but ours is a fixed amount, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that. Is the proposed levy amount different this year than the last time that the levy was renewed back in 2019?
No, in fact, the levy amount requested by the school district has remained unchanged for 6 years now, and that means if passed again, the levy will have remained unchanged for 8 years.
Okay, so can you kind of explain a little bit about the decision making behind that decision to stay the same for 8 years?
So I would say that's due to really the fiscal responsibility of the Board of Trustees and in providing direction and guidance for Pocatello-Chubbuck School District and all of the instruction, the programs, the activities that we offer our community, and to stay within the boundaries or the limits of those financial obligations. And so, again, I attribute that to our board and to our administration.
Okay, wonderful. So as you know, we've had 3 consecutive elections in 3 years. What do you think voters need to know about the difference between the 10-year school plant facilities levy, which was renewed in March of 2020, and the supplemental levy renewal, which will be on the ballot on March 9th?
That is a great question, and we hear it from time to time when we're out talking or sharing information about School District 25 and the levies. And I would just say I look at it a little bit like this, that supplemental levy makes up the difference in operating costs, I would say the daily operations of the district, whereas the school plant facilities levy is really more of a what I'd call medium to large projects that we do in the district. And so medium projects might be those of HVAC, parking lots, anything to do with infrastructure, technology kind of things, whereas larger projects might include something such as Iron Horse Stadium that we've brought online just in the last couple of years, Alameda Middle School when it was renovated and improved to bring back as a middle school, and New Horizon Center, our alternative high school, and also serve some middle school and even a K-5 program. And then finally, or most recently, is our Pocatello High School addition and the improvements that we're making there with the renovation.
Okay, so those were all monies from the school plant facility levy, which is a 10-year renewal levy. And then now we're talking about the supplemental levy. So one question I hear frequently from community members is about how the funds from the supplemental levy are allocated. Can you share some of the details about exactly what the supplemental levy funds?
Yes. So the supplemental levy funds the recruitment and retention of qualified teachers, paraprofessionals that assist our teachers on a daily basis in the classroom. It goes towards safety measures, including the upkeep, school security systems, our Safe Schools Every Day that we rolled out just, I think it's been about 2 years now. And that includes the video doorbell systems. Those are some of the examples of the supplemental levy uses. And as I mentioned earlier, just day-to-day operations, really.
Okay, so would it be accurate to say the levy is local support for local education?
Absolutely. And in fact, if I could just add maybe a couple more things to supplemental levy, that would include our academic, fine arts, and athletic programs. From time to time, whenever we have a new textbook adoption, we can use those monies for those adoptions and materials. Fixed costs, lights and heat, and the water, as they may change within our own household budgets. They will also change certainly for the school district. So we use the supplemental levy for those funds. And then as most recently, again, is the pandemic that we've experienced. And we were able to use those funds in combination with some federal funding to make the improvements that we needed to provide virtual or remote and hybrid opportunities.
Okay, that's a really thorough explanation. Thank you so much.
Yes.
So earlier this week, I gave a Zoom presentation about the levy to the Centennial Rotary Club, local club. And one of the questions asked, and I might add, it's a great question and it's one that's frequently asked, is why we have this levy on the ballot every 2 years.
Well, I would say the 2-year levy, it could be an annual levy, actually, by way it's written in statute or the law. We opt to go every 2 years because, asking our voters annually is a difficult decision for our board. It would be difficult for our county elections office to host those elections every year. So, in fact, I think it was last year, perhaps the year before, there was a bill that was being proposed that, in regards to supplemental levies, if the community had passed the levy for X number of years, then there was the option to extend the time frame for which you would have to go back out for a levy. Yeah, and so that really didn't go anywhere. And so according to, again, the statutes, we just opt to go with every 2 years rather than annual event.
Right, but it really is something that's not unique to School District 25. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. So supplemental levies are really, 80% of districts throughout the state rely on supplemental levies to make up that difference between the funding that we receive from state and federal sources to enhance the programs that we offer within our own community.
Right. So I think one way to really capture that is to talk about what percentage of the district's operating budget does the supplemental levy cover?
Presently, it's about 12%. And so, again, that can fluctuate depending on the amount of revenues that are received from state and federal sources. But for now, it is 12%. I would say that's a manageable number. We don't like to see it too high for sure, because if the levy were to not to pass, then that would be difficult to try to make up that difference when you're preparing a budget.
Right. And has the levy ever not passed?
It for 60 years running now, we have been able to maintain the levy, and that is truly because of the community support that we have for Pocatello-Chubbuck School District and for our learners and teachers, staff, alike. Yes.
Right. Is it fair to say that a large percentage of the district's operating budget goes specifically toward a specific task?
It does. The primary expenditures for School District 25 budget is really in salaries and benefits. So we value our staff greatly, and the reimbursement that we receive for our staff does not equate to the salaries that we pay. And to be competitive, even within our own community, we make that difference up with the supplemental levy. So for teachers, paraprofessionals, all of our district support staff, again, that's a primary source for us to be able to enhance the salary and benefit package for our employees.
And do you know the percentage of operating costs that those benefits and salaries are attributed to the district?
It's really between 85 to 90% of our budget.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Can you explain to our listeners what is not covered by the supplemental levy?
Yes. So I just want to touch on the school plant facilities levy again for a moment.
Yeah, sure.
And to tell you that something that I really missed an opportunity to talk about was our 5-year plan, which has just been announced in the last couple months. And that plan would allow some improvements at all of our district high school fields. And we're looking to put turf in and, look at some sponsorships for press box concessions, restrooms, and that sort of thing. So again, in combination with school plant facilities, with our and with some sponsorships, I think it's exciting what we might be able to do in the future for our community and for really other communities around us, because they will see what we have and want to be part of it.
Absolutely. Once we start being able to unveil what that plan is going to look like, I think our community is going to be very excited about what's in our immediate future.
Right. And I look at the opportunity to utilize our fields. So our football fields can become soccer fields.
Right.
We can widen them out, and then we can host track and field, football, soccer, and that could be, 8-9 months out of the year, and potentially more if we were to look at some kind of an enclosure. And again, we might be able to do that through some sponsorships in addition to the school plant facilities levy dollars. And so again, supplemental levy is daily operating costs is really, I think I've answered your question.
Right,
I hope I did.
absolutely. And that project, it's become known as the game changer around the office, but I really do believe that 5-year plan is going to be a game changer for this district and this community.
I do too. It's really exciting to talk about as we look forward to things to come.
Okay, so let's just back up a little bit now. And now that we've explained what the supplemental levy funds, I know our listeners are really probably asking, how will the levy impact me as a taxpayer in the Pocatello School District boundaries?
As I mentioned earlier, the fiscal impacts to our entire community, what the ask is $9.25 million for each of those years. And so as we go to the ballot, you will see that that's broken down per $100,000 value, right, taxable value on your home. And so once you take out the deduction, then you look at the value of your home at that point. And the rate would be $192.20 per $100,000 of taxable value of your home.
Right. And so it's really important to note that these numbers are based on current assumptions and calculations. We never know exactly what that levy rate's going to be. It's a projection. But we have included a graph on our levy fact sheets that provides some additional details. And so that facts and information sheet can be located at sd25.us for anybody who wants more information on that. Let's just go over a few more facts. Is this a new tax?
No, this is not a new tax. It's a renewal of the existing levy, as I mentioned earlier, that's been around for 60 years. And we could not be more pleased with our community support for having gone that distance with us. And I think they see and feel and recognize the value of the education that we provide for our learners, which translates into our community.
Right, it sure does. So as a taxpayer myself, should I be concerned about my taxes being redirected to cover educational costs in other communities?
No, not at all. That all would stay right here in Pocatello Chubbuck School District.
Okay, so how will the levy appear on the ballot? Will it be a yes or no question?
So it actually reads whether or not you're in favor or against the levy. And
okay.
So, yeah.
So hopefully that's self-explanatory. If you vote in favor, it is for passing or for renewing the levy.
For renewing, yes.
Or against would be against that levy renewal.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And what percentage does the levy require to pass?
So on the supplemental levy, it is a simple majority. So 50% plus one vote would make that happen.
Okay, perfect. So now to our final question. Can you help illuminate where and when do people vote?
Yes, thanks. So the voting actually will take place, the formal voting, on March 9th from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And again, it's a for or against the supplemental levy. And you'll vote at the residential precinct location within your residence, of course. And if you need to locate the polling place, you could go to the Bannock County website or contact them at 236-7333.
One of the best things I've learned since coming to work at the school district is early voting. I will never vote the same again. I love early voting. So let's talk a little bit about when does early voting begin and when does it end?
Okay. And when I mentioned earlier formal voting, I guess it's all formal voting. But if you had to be if you're confined to a single day, that would be March 9th. But the early voting actually starts on February 22nd, so just next week.
That's coming right up next Monday, February 22nd.
It is, and that will run through March 5th. So I believe that's the Friday before the Tuesday of the regular election date.
Right. So for early voting is open just for about 10 business days. So if you want to vote, it starts Monday, February 22nd and ends Friday, March 5th. And again, you can vote early at the Bannock County Elections Office. It's located at 141 North 6th Avenue, and that's adjacent to Bannock County Courthouse. So we've been talking this afternoon about School District 25 Supplemental Levy Renewal, which will be on the ballot on March 9th. And Dr. Howell, is there anything else you want to add about the levy that we didn't cover today?
I guess just to reiterate, Courtney, what you had mentioned already, if you want to learn more about the supplemental levy, we have an information and fact sheet, and that is located on our district website at sd25.us. And there's also a short video, which you host.
Yes, I do.
And it describes the information and facts for the district in a video presentation rather than if you were to try to look through the sheet at all the bulleted items.
Right. It's really all the same information. It's just kind of a walking tour of that facts and information sheet. So we can make sure that we have fully informed voters by the time they head to the polls.
Right.
Okay, so before we sign off, it's time to switch gears for just a moment. Part of the purpose of this podcast is for listeners to get to know the school district and the people who work here and the people who learn here. So we're going to work in a little bit of fun. Personally, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts in preparation for launching our own. And one of my favorites is called What Should I Read Next? I advise you to take a look at that if you love to read. It's a phenomenal resource. So I'm going to take a page out of that podcast book for our final segment. So tell me, Dr. Howell, we are a bunch of readers around here, so I thought that we could work this in really nicely. What is the last book you read? What are you reading now? And what's up next in your to-be-read pile?
Wow. So I'm not one that reads recreationally, per se. I guess having been in education for so long, having attended college and universities and through my doctoral program and so forth, my love of reading is maybe not what it used to be. However,
right. But you've always got a book on your desk.
I do.
So you are a reader.
So mine is more of a... it's not a read for leisure or pleasure. I'm probably more into the research and the evidence and best practices of education. And so the last book that I read was Be Our Guest, which is by the Disney Institute.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so I'm always looking for ways to improve the experience or to enhance it. And so when I'm able to talk to a group of administrators or a back to school event to all of our teachers or staff, just trying to find something that excites their passion for what they do. And so I don't think you can walk through the gates of Disneyland and not feel, Disney World too, whichever, but feel the experience. And so that's why I read that book, is
Wonderful.
Because I wanted to pick up some tips and tricks and how do we instill that same feeling into our staff, which will pass through to our learners.
I think that's a wonderful concept.
Yeah. And so currently I'm reading Student Learning Communities. And so we have professional learning communities for our staff. And so taking that down another level and how do we work cooperatively and collaboratively with our learners. And next up in the queue is Teaching for Transfer, which, again, an educational resource. We look at how we teach, and we focus a lot on surface, deep, and transfer learning. So we know that transfer learning is what takes us to the next level and how we're able to apply what we've learned in the deep level or from the surface level into our other experiences and other venues. And so that's probably next up for me.
Okay, those are all fascinating. And that's I was excited to ask you that question because I think that gives a great insight into the working minds behind who's educating our children. And so giving that insight into what's going on behind the scenes at the district, I think is really important for people to understand, getting to know our district. So thank you for being willing to share
Sure.
those
Thanks
with
for
us.
the question.
Absolutely. So I wanted to just thank Dr. Howell again for joining us today. You've been listening to More Together with School District 25 with today's guest, Superintendent Dr. Douglas Howell. Dr. Howell, thank you so much for joining me today to share information about the supplemental levy, and I hope you'll come back again to discuss some other issues that we might face in the future.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you for tuning in to today's podcast. Our mission at School District 25 is to think more, learn more, and be more together. If you enjoy this podcast, remember, check us out every Friday with a new episode available on our YouTube channel. And if you have an issue you'd like to hear more about, send your ideas or questions to communications@sd25.us.